You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Betoota Advocate, on Desert Rock FM. Welcome back to the Betoota Advocate radio show, recording live here in downtown Betoota. Queensland election looms. It's probably coming in about a week or two before the American election. And of course, in this part of the world, this is the election everyone's talking about. You're joined by myself, Clancy Overall, and of course, Errol Parker, editor-at-large. How are you, Errol?
Good, mate. Good to be indoors on a day like this.
Oh, mate, it's just so chilly outside.
Stinking hot day down here in the Simpson Desert.
And today's guest
is our local member.
Was our local member...
State member. Our local state member.
You've got half the town. So you've got... The line runs through Daru Street. We've got Lachlan Miller on one side, and we've got Robbie Katter, the fourth, the member for Mount Isa, formerly Mount Isa. You know, it's obviously our local member for half the town. So thank you for joining us today, Robbie. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks. I'm glad I'm not down there stuck in the hustle and bustle of the traffic, Betoota.
Yeah.
Out here in sleepy Mount Isa. Charles Towers, I should say.
Charlie's trousers.
Charlie's trousers. Now, first things first, mate. How's Daisy and the bub? You've welcomed a little one into the world just prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, well, we're still together. Everyone still asks how I did it, but evidence stands for itself. No, going well, mate. Love Mount Isa. She's very happy.
And second of all, mate, how did Bob enjoy his 2 weeks quarantine after coming home from Canberra? The hotspot of Canberra.
We had to buy a lot of your koala mattresses and put them all around the walls of the house because we were bouncing off the walls. Actually, everyone was just... in the family, just couldn't believe we were locking him in the house for 2 weeks by himself. He was. I think we found him in fetal position, sucking his thumb when we opened the.
That sounds like Bob.
How many phone calls did you get a day, you reckon?
How many did I block or did I get?
Now you are what would you say, arguably fourth generation politician.
Yeah, it's pretty sad indictment on the family.
Yeah. I guess they call them the Downers of the Northwest. Yeah. Oh, the Bairds of the Gulf. Robbie, the funny thing about the Katters is that you all at some point had a real job, unlike a lot of those dynasties we see in the LNP or in the Labor Party. What were you up to prior to following your old man into politics? Give us a little bit of a rundown of the things.
Very exciting.
Your old man likes to say that you were basically the first incarnation of Jonathan Thurston for the North Queensland Cowboys. I know you did play a bit of rugby league football, but you had a bit more to do career-wise before entering politics like your old man. Yeah,
I think Dad must have enjoyed trying to live his life through me in rugby league because he just has this image that I was a lot better than I was. I'm surprised he got me beaten up a lot more often. And I was pretty easy going, and I did the same. I think my mum and dad suggested, why don't you become a property valuer? And they're trying to sell a cattle station. Then when I was in grade 11 or 12, and I said, well, that sounds right. And I did that for 15 years. I worked in the mines for a couple of years, actually. I played rugby and worked at the mines here, and then just became a property valuer. And then you meet heaps of people when you're property valuer. And then I bought a business at Mount Isa. I was working for all these big companies and then bought a little business in Mount Isa. Someone said to me, it's better to lead your own pony than someone else's thoroughbred. And
that's true.
Go out and buy my own little business, and I did that for 7 or 8 years, I think. And it was a good little cash cow, the business in Mount Isa.
So basically, as a property valuer, you're on the campaign trail years before you even put your hat in the ring.
Precisely. It was like, and I swear, I just had, the last thing I ever wanted to do was politics because, bloody hell, life of conflict and pretty easy going. When I look back, and you were going through 5 or 10 houses a day meeting people, and thankfully for me, it was through the rising property market, so I was usually giving people good news that the value of the house had gone up. 5 or 10 years later, and I would have destroyed my political career.
Now, where would you? You're now the president of the Katter Party. As your old man in his like performative nature, he would have made a great thespian. He could have made a great performer, your old man. But he obviously held a press conference where he decided to literally hand you a pair of reins. And you are now in control. What would you say? Particularly, this is a big question that I think a lot of people would like answered. Heading into an election where the LNP kind of look like they're having a lot of their own troubles. They're obviously probably not going to be able to secure a lot of the vote that they would usually have locked in because of this COVID-19 pandemic. That's all speculation from where we're looking at things. But obviously, you provide an alternative, the KAP, outside of the two major parties and always have done. Where would you say the KAP in 2020 sits on the political spectrum? And is that even a spectrum that would apply to your party?
Yeah, that's a bloody good question, and probably the best response you just gave is, I think, everyone goes left and right, and they're such antiquated terms, and they're really, I think they're pretty silly terms to use in modern politics because it's that malleable, like people's positions on things. So on some of the economic issues, we're called agrarian socialists, so it's a bit left on that, like, they want family farms, not big corporate farms and institutional stuff, and we want to, we like to believe in small private enterprise, which then makes you sort of anti-capitalist because then suddenly you're against big business coming in and taking over things. And then, on the environmental issues and cultural issues, we're super, right of Stalin. So it's like, or we seem to be at least. So it's a bit difficult to sort of explain it. But I get where we sit, but I think if you just go back to the old country party values, which takes in a bit of old Labor and old National Party, that's probably the best way to describe it, I think.
Now, Robbie, how did Charters Towers handle their sole case of the coronavirus up there? Because as we all know, the policy born out of the importance of the southeast corner in our state. How has this policy to lock down the state impacted your area up there?
I was really disappointed because I was all charged up, man. I was ready to throw flaming toilet rolls down the street and start, embracing the chaos. But yeah, it was, most people were trying to draw us in on that debate, open the borders, and you go to the pub up at Forsyth or Burketown, and they're saying like, what coronavirus, keep the bastards out. As far as we're concerned, keep the bloody Victorians and New South Wales from out. We're enjoying a bit of the time to ourselves. So, it was a funny place for us, and we felt pretty special, as you'd understand, in Betoota. Like, you felt so. It was the one time you felt we had such a big advantage over the city and privilege.
Yeah. What is the feeling in your division, your electorate? What is the feeling? Because, if you read the newspapers, the Courier Mail, coming out of, the right-wing heartland of Murray in Brisbane, they're saying that everyone in Australia, the bush, everyone's feeling let down by the Premier with the border closures. You've got, obviously, Diane Frecklington saying not much.
Yeah.
Diane Freckleham, as we called her, Deb Frecklington. Not many people even know her name. She's not saying much. But then, obviously, Morrison's applying the pressure on the Premier. What is the feeling? People just think this is a hollow debate. No one even cares. In fact, do you reckon the Premier might have the support of your constituents on this issue?
Oh, she's definitely tested those thresholds of support over the last few years. Yeah. So,
on this issue.
Yeah, so you got a bit of ground to make up, but on this issue, look, it's probably just ambivalence, most of it. Yeah. We get to sit in our high horse a lot of the time in the country areas and laugh at the silly city folk going crazy. Because I think there's a fair bit of empathy for the impact on the economy and that sort of thing. But it's, like I said, it's one time that we felt pretty sheltered, and from the start we've been saying this is absolute lunacy. Like, shut us off. I don't know about the border, the New South Wales border, but shut off like Western Queensland or North Queensland, do some zones, and let us operate as per normal. Yeah. We had Western Queensland had 0 cases the whole time, and you go to the pub at Burrsville, or that I was probably down at the Betoota Roadhouse saying you couldn't sell beer up that end of the counter, but you could sell fuel, and the same people coming. So it just seemed ridiculous to us, and And we were saying, can you please, as usual, just make a little bit different rules for the country areas, which they never seem to understand. And that was probably the biggest frustrating part, or has been the frustrating part of it.
Yeah, so Robbie, I don't often like to ask these questions. It's a hypothetical one. Should the Katter Party win 44 seats on the 31st of October, what does your roadmap look like for Queensland moving out of this corona time that we've been in?
If it's in the ground, dig it up, grow it. You can't live in North Queensland, and especially Northwest Queensland, where you're just immersed in all this potential and resources. So, and it's all not far off its virgin state. There's so much to harvest. So mandating biofuels, mandating ethanol in cars so that there's a secondary market for grain farmers and sugar farmers, and stimulating the economy while creating clean air and in the long run creating downward pressure on fuel against the multinational oil companies. I think that's pretty good policy. That's something we'd push. Coal mining, mining and agriculture is going to be our salvation for the Queensland economy for the next 5 or 10 years at least, if not beyond that. So I think we've got a pretty good role to play if people want us to after the election to try and re-engage some of those industries, because I can absolutely sure they're struggling. Yeah, we'll just try and be that pro-development party that everyone sort of tries to say you're being parochial or you just don't like the city. And so it's got nothing to do with it. It's that you don't understand we can actually be a big provider for the state. And that, when you talk about separate state and stuff, you say it's not so much that we want to break away from it. It's just that we can contribute a lot better if there's more autonomy when you're in rural areas and you're making decisions that are more relevant, and it just takes a lot of the nonsense out of the decision making. And I think it's a pretty mature discussion to have, but everyone's straight out just pigeonholes that as, it's just country hating the city, and it's not like that. It's you're trying to develop and you're frustrated by surrounding yourself in all this potential and just seeing it cut off at the knees and thinking, I wish there was a better way to try and connect with people to get some benefit out of this.
The Katter Australia Party have always been very good at avoiding populism. I mean, I notice, while the conspiracists and the tinfoil hat types, Craig Kelly and The Bachelor up there in Mackay were all kind of anti-lockdown, anti-mask even. Some of these people, One Nation certainly had a few of that rhetoric going around. You were respecting the science of this pandemic, which is different, which is interesting because, as you said, you get tarred with the brush of being, these lunatics out bush who just want to be contrarians to everything that's coming out of the city.
Yeah. Bloody hell, like, best rule of thumb usually if you don't unless you've got a good reason not to believe it or understand it. When you say science, bloody hell, there's so much. It's not so much the science itself; it's the politicians and how they interpret or manipulate the science around things that makes me entirely cynical. Mm-hmm. And I get shivers down my spine when someone says, "Oh, I've got to believe in the science." Well, if that comes out of the mouth of a politician, that's when I start worrying. But with this, you've got enough friends and you ground check a lot of what's being told, and you know enough to get the sensible ground. We do try and get things right out here. We're not just, as you say, we're not trying to be contrarians all the time.
Anastasia, on the issue of the lockdown, the borders, and everything she's done, and held strong on to keep the borders closed and to keep coronavirus out of Queensland. She's probably won the support of a lot of Queensland, regardless of their political alignment on that issue. Where would you say she's let down your constituents?
Oh boy!
In the last term,
try and build anything bigger than a cubby house in Queensland, and you'll have 4 departments trying to stop you. Yep. And Dad got $250 million for dams, and it's funny actually because bureaucrats will always say, "Oh yeah, that's brilliant. We love this project," and they love it until you see you've actually got money for it. And when it becomes real, they go, "Oh, actually, there's a few problems with this dam. We'll have to," and they're absolute world experts at coming up with great creative excuses not to do stuff. And I would say the Premier is, would be if not a gold medalist, a podium finisher in not doing stuff and avoiding everything. So, and like the frustrating thing for me is they recently had a big announcement. We'd been working on keeping the copper smelter open in Mount Isa.
Yeah.
And, you know, the bare bones of that really is if it's shut down in Mount Isa, it opens up in China as a much dirtier smelter where they get all the jobs out of it. So it's like, do you want a smelter in Australia or not? And they sort of think it's a big favour to you that they're helping to keep the smelter open. That's the mindset, I think. And it's like, I'm trying to help you guys here. This is not you helping me.
Yep.
I'm not asking you for a football stadium in Mount Isa, which would be nice. I'm asking you to help. And it's pretty frustrating and you actually angry when, you know, you're trying to give them stuff that helps their economy and helps them do their job, and they can go and build their Cross River Rail in Brisbane and build another sports stadium. But at least let me help you keep some jobs in industry going. I think the hallmark of the Premier, she says, I've created 10,000 jobs. No, you haven't. You bought them with my money.
Yeah.
Like, it's my taxes to create public servant jobs. And, you know, we need public servants are very valuable in a lot of ways, but you don't say you're creating jobs. That's, you know, I've got a front row seat to industry development in the regions, and I can tell you, like, everything is hard and everything's going backwards in those ways. So, yeah, I would give her a very poor scorecard in trying to align with those things that I'd love to achieve in politics.
And when it comes to Frecklington, the LNP leader, what would you say is her greatest kind of flaws in the sense that why should people in your 3 seats you got now, looking good for 4, why should people in the KAP electorates vote for KAP instead of LNP? What have you got over them, and what don't they offer?
Yeah, that's easy. They've just got this bipolar sort of character where they're trying to pretend to still be the old Nationals but go down to Brisbane and be the Liberals at the same time. It's all under the qualification, we have these robust internal party discussions. Oh, really? Like, show me someone across the floor, because there was 2 people across the floor in about 15 years. That's not that robust. And when you have, you know, we put dairy bills in, rural bank bills, there was a reef bill the other day and they all vote with Labor on it. You go, that's fine. Like, you know, that's Parliament and politics, but don't come back out bush and say, oh, we're all for the farmers. Like, be consistent. And so I think it's really difficult for them. It's been a failed marriage with the Liberals and Nationals. And I think whoever's in Deb's job has got a really tough gig, because they've got to try and, you know, say they love the reef and we've got to stop farming to damage the reef. And then she's got to go back up to Burdekin and Ingham and the likes and say, oh, but we actually, you know, that's all nonsense about the reef. We love farmers. That's a really tough gig. I think she has trouble doing that. And I think I wish them well. Go and become the Liberal Party and we'll be the representatives of the country area. And, you know, do what you do well, but and battle Labor on that basis. But that's the trouble they have, is they've got an identity crisis. And the sooner they wake up to that, the happier life they'll live.
I suppose that one thing that they do have, like, an issue committing on is energy policy. And,
great example.
where they say that mining's great for jobs in North Queensland, but then they go back down to Brisbane and say that, you know, we have to stop the coal mining, we have to stop exporting, we've got to close down Hay Point and Gladstone, you know. But what would a future look like in North Queensland if they forced the country to move into renewables? What would North Queensland then, you know, effectively be forced to do?
Well, I think if that happened, it's fair to assume that you'd see a diminution or a decline in the development of coal reserves, and there's enormous coal reserves there, and that's, you know, like it or love it. I mean, it's great to find alternatives, but it's paying the bills at the moment until you find the things that replace the bills. So I think that's nothing against renewables, and there's some, in fact, Mount Isa and the western areas of Queensland, Mount Isa is probably the best place to contribute in that space, because where you're so far west, you know, we're about an hour behind in sunlight. So if you have, you know, sunlight generating power, photovoltaic, whatever, that will feed into the grid and hits at the peak hour, you know, peak tariff on the coast, on the east coast. And, you know, there's just so much. Like, so another thing with renewables, like I've said to the government 3 or 4 times, like, most of my electorate is not connected to the grid. On those cattle stations, the cockies love the solar pumps. And like, why are you feeding the solar in on the grid against your own generators when you they'll subsidise, they'll pay for a lot more of the portion of the cost of solar out in the cattle stations. They love the bloody solar stuff out in them, and they don't have any mains power. They're burning diesel generators or petrol generators. Yeah. So there's a lot of good stuff you can do, but you got to get people to listen, and they sort of listen to extent, but they never follow through. Like I got them to do a study on that solar stuff on rural, but it ended up being on cane farms on the coast, and they missed the point. And there's a happy medium, I think, with it. Ethanol's a great one because people say, "What's your environmental policy for ethanol?" Well, tell me something else that reduces it. 10% E10 in your tank reduces your emissions by 30%. So if we mandate E10, make every car do it, which is a lot less impost than when we changed from unleaded fuel to leaded fuel to unleaded fuel 30 years ago. It's a lot less impost than that. Then
leaded fuel. You had prams on the side of the road and leaded fuel burning down this main street of Mount Isa.
The bloody E10 had burnt out every valve in my old Land Cruiser Prado, I'll tell you that much. It's on the good stuff still. That
that's a good policy because it takes 30. It's equivalent to taking 30% of cars off the road. I reckon it's a pretty good thing.
Right now, it feels like coal's on the nose at a mainstream level. Even as you said before, with the LNP identity crisis, Labor's having the same identity crisis. They've got CFMEU trucks in the middle of Claremont with signs saying "Start Adani" on it, which I don't think was really good for Bill Shorten's brand leading into an election. You've got, you've got two parties torn down the middle with that. Let's say they all go the same way and decide that coal is on the nose. What do you do for a lot of people in your electorate too? They got used to making a lot of good coin in the berm. What do you do there? Because as much as Bob Brown comes up with his convoy and says, "Oh, you blokes can make the same amount of money with a windscreen wiper on a solar panel," that's just not going to be the case. What would be the alternative in terms of jobs in the coal mining regions?
Exactly. I don't have a good answer for that, and that's when people bang on me about cars. I don't really have a good answer, but I'm not willing to give up my Toyota and my house at the moment. Yeah. So. I enjoy having those, and until you're willing to give up some of your stuff, I think we've got a bit of a problem. So, but let's work. There's other things we can do, and it's not all about coal. Like where I live in the Northwest Mineral Province, we're trying to build a power line, a big stuff off power line. Trying language for the kids, PG. But, and if high voltage line, we pay the highest electricity prices in the industrial world in Mount Isa. Not many people know that. So, if you're on the grid in Australia, you pay $60, $70 a megawatt hour. Mount Isa, you pay $200 a megawatt hour. We built this transmission line, you can halve that. And if you halve electricity prices for mines in a mineral province with $580 billion worth of minerals still in the ground, that's not too bad. Yeah. And there's no replacement on the horizon for copper, zinc. There is for lead, but lead's still got demand out there. So, look, there's still plenty can be done outside of just coal.
Can you give us a little rundown on some of the candidates you got running? I mean, obviously you've got yourself, Knuth, Danieletto,
Minister for Muscles,
the Minister for Jet Skis, shirtless jet ski photo shoots. Where else you got? You got someone running in the tip?
Can I stay on Nick DeMino a second? He is the biggest characterisation of a wog I've ever met. I went to his house, and his wife's nice, Toyota Corolla or whatever it is, next to his Hilux Ute, are out on the street because inside his garage is his speedboat with a 400 horsepower motor and his race car.
They're drinking limoncello with the 4X Gold.
I said, Nick, you just couldn't be any more stereotype than his drag car next to his speedboat.
Hey, mate, the Catters looked like that a few generations ago.
But now we could, look, down in your country there, we've got fellow Rick Gannett, who's he's probably more KP than KP. He's just pure farmer. Then we've got up north in Cook, we've got a young girl called Tanika Parker who grew up at Hopevale, and she's related to Matty Bowen, which is sort of akin to royalty up there. And she's a nurse, registered nurse that's gone back home there. We've got a heap of candidates in Townsville, basically in the footprint of North Queensland. Sam Cox is running for us in the Burdekin's, a red hot chance. I can go through heaps of names there. We've got some Yeah, really strong field, but we only field like 10 to 15
Yep.
so that you can focus on actually winning seats.
Not like One Nation, you don't pull up outside the boxing tent and give everyone a number.
Yeah, well, it's ambitious,
Yeah. Well, Robbie, as we saw down south in the New South Wales state election not too long ago, we saw a massive rejection of the way that that rural voters kind of held the National Party, in that you saw them lose some of the safest kind of seats that you could have in the country to the shooters, farmers and fishers.
Yeah.
Is the sentiment, in your opinion, in Queensland kind of the same?
Oh, it definitely is, and that could be. I could be setting myself up for a big failure because something very real. So if we're not successful, you'd say, well, we're pretty bloody hopeless because the vacuum is very real. The challenge is to insert yourself into people's consciousness where people have mainly switched off from politics.
Yep.
Yeah.
So and try and do that without a $1 million campaign budget.
Yeah.
It's pretty tricky. So get people interested in politics, insert a new brand name where they've had 50 or 100 years getting used to the old one, and try and present yourself as an alternative and make sure you're credible. And that's been the challenge for us and others. And like I said earlier, I think, I don't begrudge the LNP or Labor having a spot in Parliament, but just work, stick to who you want to represent. Don't try and be everything to everyone. And, there's a good place for everyone in there. But it's ridiculous to think that they still represent the farmers. It's just nonsense. I've got a long catalogue of sort of crucial rural bills we put through Parliament that they've happily voted against. So
this might actually be a record too. Actually, up there in the Cook electorate, would probably be the first time two Indigenous women have run against each other.
Yeah, probably is.
In North Queensland. You've got the KAP, who obviously represent. People don't realise this as well, like a diverse community across all your seats. I mean, as we just said, I was having trouble pronouncing some of the last names of your sitting members, and you've got a lot of different industries. You got from fruit. I've seen your old man put on the Sikh turban on whatever community event that was at, and you've got a whole lot going on there. The Katters, I guess you could say, have followed, as you said. The voters have spent 100 years getting used to the most recent party they've been voting for, and you're trying to insert yourself in there. I guess there has been an incarnation of your last name in every party in the bush. Was there ever any Labor in the Katter family?
Yeah, back I believe it was the DLP. So the family, I think it was in the 40s and 50s. They were originally the Labor Party, and from what I gather, it's probably too strong a word, but I think family was sort of social outcasts a little bit. They were big. They had a big business in Cloncurry, but they were dark-skinned Lebanese, and for whatever reason, I'm not sure what the motivation were, but they were the members of the Labor Party then, and then there was the split, which I think was around the 60s, and they went to the DLP, which sort of morphed then into the Country Party, which then morphed into the National Party, and and here we are today.
Do you have much to do with the shooters and fishers? I mean, obviously there is that, the third force in rural Australia. It's a bit of a trend. I mean, South Australia have got their own thing going on there. Their centre alliances and their Xenophons, and then down in Victoria, the Nats are obviously in quite a lot of turmoil. Do you keep in touch with these kind of intrastate kind of third options?
Yeah, we're very interested in reaching out and trying to find points of similarity. And that would be, great benefit to both, all of us, I think. But then you don't want to, it's not sort of reaching out and trying to morph into something different for the sake of it.
Yeah.
So we're not desperate to expand. We have an interest in pushing, an agenda and a suite of policies. And if people want that, whatever, we could change the name, morph into something else. It's not about propagating a name or a brand. It's about pushing a suite of policies. So whatever's the best vehicle to do that. And KAP is for us at the moment. And, if something better comes along later, then we use that.
The big issue that's come up throughout leading into this election is youth crime, particularly in rural areas.
Yeah.
KAP have always been on the front foot with this. Unlike the National Party, I guess, who like to pretend that ICE doesn't exist in the bush or like to pretend that there is no problem. In fact, a lot of people would say that the National Party don't really even look at the towns. They don't even kind of serve the towns in many kind of electorates. The KAP, you and your old man have spoken about this a lot, and particularly up there in the FNQ, there is this issue of youth crime, and this isn't just a stereotype. This isn't like this isn't like Melbourne when you're leading into election when all of a sudden there's a big crime spree. This isn't necessarily a campaign kind of fantasy. This is pretty clear numbers on a piece of paper.
Oh yeah, it's beyond words, really. Like trying to relate to the statistics. I remember at one point, and it may still be the case in Mount Isa, it wasn't the average number, the actual number of offences in one category was comparable to Brisbane.
Yeah.
So an 18,000 population versus a 1 million population, and we had comparable total statistics in one category. So they're just off the dial things, and it's, not to sound too bloody self-righteous or anything, but you just got to listen to people. Like, you're mostly talking about Indigenous problem, our First Australian brothers up there in Mount Isa. They're having all sorts of problems in their communities, alcoholism, substance abuse. But you just got to ask the right questions. It's common sense. Follow why are the kids on the street? Because it's not safe at home. Mum and dad aren't looking after them. Why are mum and dad having troubles? Because he hasn't got a job. And why hasn't he got a job? Let's go back to communities. Why haven't we got a job there? We can't get a blue card. Okay, let's look at blue cards. Let's fix the blue cards. Yeah. And you just got to follow these things through and create opportunities for jobs for the parents. And that's a lot. These are long things to turn around, but you just got to ask the right questions and get on the ground and see where the problems are. But, they'll say, you've got to adjust the youth justice system and the parole period or something. You think, God, you're missing the point. Like, you're dealing with the symptoms, but what's the real issue here? And, another one, like, it's so obvious now, but there's, I think, through the 70s or 80s, a lot of First Australians come off the stations, but in the 80s, I think was more pertinent. 80s, early 90s, it was Kevin Rudd, I think, was one of the head public servants in Queensland under Wayne Goss, and they took about 800 railway jobs between Townsville, and you had a lot of Islanders, Indigenous work on that railway line. And quite literally, some of those families now are the ones struggling because they just lost their purpose in life, and, they had that uniform in the railways.
Well, Marbo was in the railways himself, wasn't he?
Oh, it probably was, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So you're saying, some families haven't been able to get above the poverty line since then?
Yeah, pretty clear to see when you sort of reflect on it now. But and people in Brisbane make these decisions and go, and you think, boy, oh boy, you do not know how severe the consequences are of some of those, rationalising decisions have. And until you try and turn those things around, I think you're wasting your time.
I have seen some ideas put forward by your party. Bush School? What are you calling it? What's this program?
Well, the policy is called Relocation Sentencing, but it's sort of going back to their old law, LORE, but in the context of the First Australians. But it's basically saying white or black, if your kids are playing up, one of the biggest gaps that they have in services is given the ability, whether it's youth justice or the coppers or magistrate, to say, mate, just get the hell out of town. Like, we're sending you at a facility, and that can, you can gratify a lot of the angry locals that just got their car stolen by saying, mate, we got him out of town. But also those people that believe in reforming these kids, like, let's not just throw them to the wolves, let's try and turn them around. If you've got a remote facility, you can start to, it's a lot easier to bloody lay a slab or build a fence or, take them fishing for one day if they're behaving themselves all week, or, you can do stuff out bush. And I've seen with my own two eyes, really bad kids going out to Yirrandangi or Dajara or something, and they just transform, because when they're taken out of that environment, they're fine, but you've got to get them well away, not 20 Ks out of town or 50 Ks out of town. You've got to take them 400 kilometres away. You don't need fences or anything out there, because good luck,
No, it's not. It's not a prison.
No, that's right. And so that's the big gap that's missing, and that's the big policy that landmarks of the policy. We want to deal with youth crime, and people are begging for it. And I'm yet to find anyone that disagrees with me on it, which is pretty big, because for the last 3 or 4 years, the politicians usually you draw out a few haters or people that disagree. But it's just a matter of getting government to decide that it's actually their idea and rebadge it. And
Yeah. Well, just before we go, Robbie, what are the key promises that the KAP's taken to this election?
Well, the big ones is building dams and water storage.
Yep.
And ethanol mandate will work very strongly on that in power and enhance our mining in the state. So we see one of the big ones is the government want to build, it's about 12 kilometres of rail line, which has gone up for $12 billion in Brisbane to get people to work 10 minutes earlier. Watch the Today Show for 10 minutes longer. Yeah. And you can build 300 kilometres of rail line into the Galilee Basin that makes the taxpayer money for the next 20 or 30 years. So they're the sort of things we can deliver if we get in. I guess trying to turn things around in rural industry, main thing is rural bank. There's a huge appetite. You go and try buy a house in Betoota at the moment, the banks just whack a bloody postcode discrimination on you and you won't get the loan.
It's a disgrace. So,
yeah, I mean, you're trying to get some young people to move out there or buy the tyre shop in Richmond. Yeah. They can't even get the finance. Once you do, you break the ankles of someone and finally get them to stay there, and they can't even get the finance. So we want to see a rural bank. I put legislation in State Parliament for Liberal and Labor both voted against it, but we'll try and get something up like that because I think that will be perhaps not the salvation, but maybe a good policy to upturn things around a bit too.
Let's just say you hold the balance of power in a month's time. Is that going to be something you're going to have to sit on?
I wonder if they actually give you something like a staff or something. That would be cool.
A gavel.
Or you get to hold the mace in Parliament.
One day, yeah. I have a cousin that would really enjoy that. If I did, sorry, what was the question?
If you did have the balance of power, would you have to sit on it?
Yeah, you'd want to know whoever you were empowering there were pretty closely aligned with your agenda. And I reckon that's good news for them because I'm not there asking for streets paved with gold. I'm asking for things that make them money. So, they shouldn't see it as such a burden, but who knows? They think funny sometimes, those politicians.
And lastly, who's your pick for the NRL 2020 Premiership?
Well, until last week, Roosters, who I hated saying it. Bloody hell! I mean, we can cross off the Cowboys. I still had some.
Yeah. There was a little engine that could this year, until it couldn't. Honestly, I just can't see. I think it's because I just don't like Penrith for some reason. But I really didn't want Roosters. And I took on a bet with friends at the start of the year, I took Melbourne. So I'm just going to say Melbourne because I'm a financial interest. Yeah.
Well, you heard it here first.
Yeah, heard it here first. I mean, it basically has been a Queensland team for a while. So they've been based on the sunny coast. So I guess that's if you want to talk.
Or Redcliffe, if only they had a team there that was ready to go, it'd be great.
Vlanders might bump up the Dolphins. That could be a real go there.
He certainly doesn't mind making decisions.
Yeah. Could use a bit of that in politics. Anyway, thanks for joining us today, Robbie. All the best. All the best with the red whitewash, the KAP landslide in this incoming Queensland election. I reckon you're going to paint it red.
Yeah, thank you. I did need to congratulate you too. I listened to one of your podcasts with Billy Birmingham. Last Christmas, I was driving down to see the family, and it was absolute. As I said before, if it wasn't a gold medal, it was a podium finisher for podcast.
Oh, thanks, mate. Thank you. Actually, we interviewed Joy McKean last week. Slim's.
I have to listen to that one.
Slim's wife. We actually were talking about the Catters before we went to air. She said she has had many very long conversations with your dad when she pulls into town because he reckons he knows who killed the Jolly Swag Man.
Those years ago.
Can I tell you one story?
That's a great story.
One of my best mates, he's just always bagged Slim Dusty. I just, that's just sacrilege out in the bush. Yeah. And he told me one day a story of his dad who's in his 70s, got gypped for tuppence or whatever it was, £4, £4 or something at the show somewhere because he had to hold the cigarette in his mouth and Slim missed it, so he didn't pay him the money. So the animosity's gone generational now.
Right, yeah. Just rubbishing Slim.
Like you're the only person in Western Australia, like Western Queensland or rural Australia, that doesn't worship Slim.
Yeah, it's quite a universal sentiment you're rubbing up against there, mate. Well, all the best, mate.
No dramas, yeah.
Good luck.
We'll see you. We'll see you when we see you.
Keep up the work, please.
See you at the next Isa Rodeo.
Yeah, beauty.
Or beef week.